Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be creating this small website using Next.js and the Pokemon API. So as you can see on the screen, you're going to see a lot of characters. You can also load more characters. Alright, and you can also click any of these characters and then you're going to see the stats of the character. Okay, and you can click a different character, it's going to change to the character. And also the background is going to be dynamic, it's going to generate a random color for each background. Okay. And yeah, up here we can search. For example, if I search for Pikachu, you're going to see the corresponding characters to whatever you've typed in the input. Or even if only 3 characters match, or 3 characters match, or 4 characters, or 1 character, it's going to show you, it's going to display the corresponding data depending on the characters you have in the input. Okay, I'm just going to click one of these characters, and then it's going to load and show you the stats. Okay, and I'll search for a different one, and then yeah, it will show you the stats of the character and the character. By the way, we are going to be using Lodash to do debounce, so to do a delay. So when you're searching, it's going to call a function, but there's going to be like a delay to call that function, like 5 milliseconds. So every time you update, it's going to take 5 milliseconds to update. Okay. And yeah, click on the character. It will show you the image. You can use a different image for this one if you want to. And yeah, that's it for this small website. You can pretty much do any more features that you want to implement, or you can comment if you want me to add anything else. So yeah, if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also please share the video. And yeah, I'll see you in the video. Okay, so as you can see, I've already created the project and I haven't done anything to it. So just type this command to your terminal to create a next project. Okay, so let's start by going to the index file. Let's get rid of everything in the main. I'm just going to collapse these divs and then get rid of them. I'm also going to cut this head and I'm going to put it inside the document. And then yeah, just put the head in here. Okay, so now save. As you can see now, it's empty. There's still some styles. It's coming from the global. Okay, so let's go in the global CSS, Control A, remove everything, save. So now as you can see, it's now blank. Okay, there's still some styles coming from the module, which is being imported, I think, in the document. No, actually, not in the index. So get rid of these imports here, get rid of everything in here, and then save. Okay, so now we should have an empty file. Get rid of this CSS module here. All right, so now it's empty. Perfect. So what we need to do now first, we need to get rid of the API folder. Go inside the source file folder, and we're going to create a context folder. So we're going to be creating a global state, which we're going to do some requests for the data that we're going to be using. We're going to be using the Pokemon API. So if you go to this website, pokapi.co, you'll be able to see the API we're going to be using. Okay, so we're going to do some fetching. So if you want to fetch a specific character, you can just type in the character you want to fetch the data. So let's say Pikachu. When I hit enter, you're going to get the data corresponding to that character. Okay, so let's copy this URL here. This is going to be the base URL. Copy. Go in the context and create a global.js file. And then here, we're going to create a global context. We're just going to export const global provider. So the children is going to be the entire application. We're going to wrap the entire application on the global provider. And then we're going to be able to access the global state. So here we're just going to return. Return. All right. And then here we're going to do global provider. And then here we're just going to put the children, which is going to be the application. We're going to wrap the entire application on the global provider. By the way, we don't have the global context yet. We need to create that context. We need to import React first. import React, and then here we need to say const global context, and then we're going to do react.create context. Or if you don't want to do this, you can do like this, comma, create context. Okay, so you don't have to do react.create context. Okay, so in the value here, I'm just going to say hello world. So in this case, this is temporary. We're going to be passing in our state later. Okay, for us to be able to access this global provider, we need to wrap our application, which is the children, with this global provider. But first, we need to be able to access this value here. We need a function to do that. So we're going to create a function. We're going to export this function because we want to be able to access the function anywhere we want. So here we're going to export const use global context. And then here we're just going to say React. We're going to return React to use context and then global context. So we need to import the hook, use context. Okay. So now this function is going to allow us to access whatever values, state values we have in here, use the global context. So we need to wrap our application. So we need to go to the document, actually in the app, we're going to return a fragment. Okay, and then here we do this. Let's do global provider. So make sure you import global provider from context. Okay, so save. Hopefully, actually, let's go in the index. So for us, we're going to say const g for global equal to use global context. Okay, so we're importing, we're getting this function use global context here from the global, which is going to allow us to access the value cog g for global. And then let's go press F12 to go to the console. As you can see, it says hello world. That means we have access to our state values. Okay, so what we need to do now, I'm going to get rid of this. So I'm just going to rename the global to make sure it's a correct spelling. Global, I cannot type, global.js. Okay, perfect. So in our global, let's do some initial data fetching. Let's create the initial state first as well. So I'm going to say const initial state. So we're going to start with the Pokemon data. So first off, I'm going to show you in the final product, we're going to have 20 items. Okay, we're going to fetch these 20 items initially. So we're going to put those items in a Pokemon data, Pokemon property. Actually, I'll call it all Pokemon. You can name this whatever you want. Okay, so that's where the initial 20 items are going to be stored in. And then I'm going to create another one called Pokemon. This is where the properties of the individual Pokemon are going to be stored in. And then I'm going to do Pokemon database. So this is going to be all of the items. This should be an array. All of the items in the database. So if I go here, if I click this, you can see we're getting all of the items in the database, which is 1,281 items. So we're going to be storing those items in this Pokemon database. Okay, and then we're going to say search results. Search results is going to be an empty array initially, and then we're going to do next, and then it's going to be empty for now, and then we're going to do loading, which is going to be false on initial array. So for us to be able to, we need to pass this state in here. So we're going to spread the values, initial state. So if I go back to index, if I go back to the console, hopefully we should be able to see. We should be able to, okay, and so this should be global. Okay, so hopefully, as you can see now, we can see our state values, initial state. So we want to be able to change the initial state. So for us, we're going to be using the use reducer to change the initial state. So I'm going to say const So the use reducer is going to take state and then the dispatch function, which is going to allow us to dispatch some actions, and also it's going to take a reducer function that allows us to also change the state based on the action we want to perform. Okay, so the first thing is going to be the state, which is the initial state, and then dispatch, and then use reducer, and then the initial state, which we have, and the reducer function, which we don't have at the moment. So I'm just going to create a reducer function here temporarily. We can move this later to a separate file. So I'm just going to say const. So the const reducer is going to take in the action, the state and the action. Okay, so first off, let's just return state for now, because you need to return something in here. So return state, initial state, save. So now we shouldn't have any errors. Use reducer because we haven't imported the hook yet. So use reducer. Okay, so now we need to, instead of initial state, we need to do the state that is coming from the use reducer. Okay, spread those values in here. Okay, so now we're still seeing the same thing. Okay, so now we need to do the initial fetching of the data. Reducer. I'm also going to, I lost the base URL. I'm going to copy it again. In here, I'm going to say base URL. Okay, const base URL equal to this URL here. Okay, so this is going to be our base URL. So now let's fetch the initial 20 items. So I'm going to say const all Pokemon, and then it's going to be async. And then for us, we're going to be using fetch API, or you can use Axios if you want to. We're going to say const response, and then equal to await, because we're using async, we need to do await, and then fetch base URL, and then Pokemon, and then the limit is going to be 20. Okay. And then here we're going to say const data. We're going to put the response in a data variable, and then await response.json. We're going to convert the response to JSON, and then here we can cog data. So on initial render, let's run this function, use effect. Okay, so on initial render, let's run the function. So make sure you import use effect as well. So let's go back. Let's go to React Developer Tools. Okay. Actually, here's the data on initial render. So the data is in the results. Okay. So if you want to go to the next page, to go to the next 20 items, we can go to this URL. So in the results, we're getting a name and a URL. So the name we're getting of each individual character, we don't get the properties yet. So for each character, it is a URL. And then we need to go to this URL to get the properties of that specific character. Okay, so we're only getting a name and a URL for that character. So in here, we need to do an action of loading. So before we get the data, we're going to dispatch, and then the type of the action is going to be loading. We don't have this action yet. We need to create that action. So I'm just going to do actions here. We're going to move this to a separate file later. Actions, I'm going to say loading. Okay, so in the reducer, we're going to switch. Okay, switch action.type. So the type is loading here. We have loading at the moment. So we're going to do case loading, and then we're going to return the initial state, and then we're going to set the loading property to true. Okay, so let's save this. So when we don't have data, the loading is going to be true. When we have the data, it's going to be false. We haven't set the false yet. So let me go to the React Developer Tools components. So if I go to the global context provider, okay, click here. So the loading is staying true. It's gonna stay like this. We need a way to update this to put this to false. So when we receive the data, we want to change this to false. Okay, to stop loading. So to do that, we need to create another action. So this action is for, it's going to allow us what happens when we get the data. So I'm going to create a lot of few actions for now. So we're going to do const and then get Pokemon, const get Pokemon, and then we're going to do get all Pokemon. Okay, and then we're also going to get all Pokemon data and the search data. I'm just going to paste the rest of the actions here. Okay, so get all Pokemon data, search. I'm going to be explaining these actions as we go through the video. Okay, so now loading. After we get the data, we're going to dispatch. We want to send this data to results through a payload, and then we want to change the state. Okay, so here we're going to dispatch. We're going to dispatch an action. So the action we're going to dispatch on this one, let's dispatch get all Pokemon. Okay, so get all Pokemon, and then the payload is going to be the data that is coming from the API. And then once we get that data, here we're going to say case get all Pokemon. We're just going to return. We're going to change the state all Pokemon, the property. We're going to copy the initial state, the previous state, and then update the all Pokemon property with the payload, whatever we're sending through the payload, which is the data coming from the API. And then we're going to change the property of loading to false. Okay, when we do this action. So now let's save. So hopefully, as you can see now, the all Pokemon property, it has 20 items. Each item contains a name and a URL. Okay, so for these 20 items, on initial render, we also want to fetch the data of this corresponding character. So when I copy this URL and then paste this on a new link, it's going to fetch the properties of this character. Okay, there's a lot of properties here for this character. There's a lot of properties. So when we hit this URL, we fetch the property of that character, whatever character. So what we need to do after we fetch these 20 items, which is a name and a URL, and then after that we want to fetch character data. So to fetch the character data, we're going to be creating a local array here. I'm just going to say const. I'm going to say Pokemon data equal to an empty array for now. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to loop through the data results here. Okay, so I'm going to say const, for loop. For I'm going to be saying Pokemon, each individual Pokemon of data results. Okay, data results. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say const Pokemon response. We're going to be await fetch Pokemon .url. Okay, because each Pokemon, it has a name and a URL, so we're going to be fetching that URL. Okay, let me show you what I mean. So if I do COG, let's see what we get on the Pokemon. If I go back to the console, we have an issue. Pokemon is not defined because this is a variable. Okay, so now let's go back to the console. As you can see here, we have 20 items, and then they have name and URL. So we need to fetch the URL of all of those items. Okay, that's why we're using a loop here. So here, let's do COG Pokemon response, save. We should have a response, but we need to convert that to JSON. Okay, so here I'm gonna say const Pokemon data. We're going to convert that to JSON, and now we can do COG Pokemon data. As you can see now, we get the data, all of the data for each individual item. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to push that data I'm going to push that data to this array here. It's actually, wait, the names are conflicting here. Let me name this all Pokemon data, I think. The names, so the names don't conflict. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to push. By the way, it remembered what I've named this when I was doing the project off screen. So it remembered the naming. So yeah, we're pushing that to this array. So now, so this array, I want to put this in a state, in some kind of a state. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another local state. So this data here, we can put in the state. Okay. So I'm going to say const or I'm going to say Pokemon data or Pokemon data. Okay. So this is our initial state. And then set or Pokemon data. I'm going to take this local array and then change this state value here, and then I'm going to put all those all of those values in here in this state. So let's save. Use state. We don't have use state yet. We need to import use state as well. So use state. Okay, save. So let's go to the components. Hopefully in the local state, which is let's refresh this. Global provider. Okay, as you can see in our state now, we have 20 array items with objects of each individual character, because we're fetching the data on for the initial 20 characters. Okay, as you can see, we have the data. Perfect. So now that we have the data for all those characters, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just send that data down here. So here I'm just going to say all Pokemon data. That's what I need for now. I'm going to send that. So now what we can do is you can go to the index and we can have access to that. Okay. So index, instead of this, we need all Pokemon data. Instead of accessing all of the state, here I can console log this. You can see if I go to the console, we're going to have all Pokemon data. As you can see, it's an array of 20 items. Perfect. I'm going to get rid of this. So now, what we need to do, let's start by, let's say, displaying the data of all of the Pokemon. Okay. So I'm going to get rid of the fragment actually. No need for this. In the main, I'm going to say dot all Pokemon. So you can name this class whatever you want, or you can use a CSS module for this class. Okay. So here I'm going to say all Pokemon data. Okay. So I'm going to check if we have all Pokemon data. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to just put a loading. Okay. So a div of loading. I'm going to change this later. All right. So in here, we're going to do some cards, display these cards here. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to return. So let's return a div. Oops, div. Oh my days. Okay, so let's return a div. Why is it not closing? It's not closing for some reason. Okay, so we return a div. So in the div, let's start with the image. I'm going to say dot. I'm just going to name this card image. And then we're going to do img. Okay, so for the source, it's going to be quite a lengthy URL. So for example, let me go to the array. So for the source, For the source, it's going to be in the sprites, and then other, and then I think home, and then front. Okay, so front shiny. That's what we're going for. So it's going to be a lengthy URL for the source. Okay, so here we're going to get the individual Pokemon, and then dot sprites. I'm just going to paste the whole name here. Okay, like this. Pokemon dot sprites dot other dot home dot front shiny. Save. Okay, so now you can see we have a list of the images. Okay, that we're after. So after that, for the alt tag, you can do Pokemon.name like that. Save. Okay, so as you can see, everything good. So now we also need to give it a class. I think I'll just name it card or Pokemon. I'll just name it card. Okay, so the class name is card. We have a key, which is the ID. I'm actually, when I click this, I want to route to a specific Pokemon like this. We're going to do that later actually. So now let's just focus on styling these cards. So we have the image, card image. I'm going to say dot card body, card body like this. So in the card body, I'm just going to do an H3. So this is going to be the name of the Pokemon, the name, and then I'm also going to do a P tag, which is the more details P tag. So this is an HTML entity for a space, and then this right arrow. Save. As you can see here, there it is. Perfect. So now what I'm just going to do, I'm just going to go for the styles in the global CSS. Okay, so let's go back in the global. Let's do basic page resetting the paddings and the margins that we have on initial render. I'm also going to import a font. So the font I'm going to be using is Inter. If you go on Google Fonts, you can get this font in whatever font weights you want, and then you can just copy the import link. All right, and in the body, I'm just going to give it a default color. A default color of hash F0 like that, and then setting the font family. Okay, as you can see, the font family has now changed. Okay, so let's start with the cards. All right, so go back to the index. So the class name is all Pokemon. Copy this. All Pokemon. We want to display a grid. Display. So this should be a grid, not flex. So this grid is going to be responsive. So we're going to be using min-max autofill. So it's going to be automatically responsive autofill. So the minimum width of the item is going to be 250 pixels. When I save, as you can see, we have a grid. So let me inspect. As you can, it's going to be automatically responsive. It's automatically going to go to the next line. Okay, so as long as the minimum width is 250 pixels. Okay, as you can see, that's our grid. These are our grid items. Perfect. So now I'm just going to give it a padding and a margin. It's going to go on the container of each of all of these Pokemon. So as you can see, we have a margin top and bottom 3 RAM, left and right 15 RAM. So we have this spacing. Okay, so I'm going to target all Pokemon and each individual card. I'm just going to do display flex and then flex direction to column. And then I'm going to give it a bit of a box shadow. Save. As you can see here, there's a nice box shadow here. It's very subtle. I don't think you can see it. And then give it a border radius of 12 pixels and then a transition. Okay, nice. So what we need to do now is on hover, we need to style and change the opacity of this shadow. So on hover, I'm going to say box shadow and then translate this to minus 5 pixels on the y-axis when I hover, as you can see. It's nice. Okay, so what we need to do now is style the image. I'm going to give it a max height of 250 pixels. So we're selecting all Pokemon card and then the image. Okay, when I inspect, so this Pokemon item, it is a class of card and then the card image, which is going to be the container of this image, and then the body of the card. Okay, so the height of the card container is going to be 250 pixels, and then I'm going to give it a border top radius of 12 pixels and border top left radius. Okay, and then I'm going to target the image. So for the image, I'm going to give it height and width of 100%, and then object fit, I'm going to set that to contain instead of cover, contain. Okay, I'll get rid of these properties here, save. Okay, so it looks like it's coming up slowly. Okay, so I'm now after the image, I'm going to target the body of the card. So the card body, I'm going to give it a padding and height of 200 pixels. Okay, so nice. So as you can see now, it's coming nicely. I'm going to give it a background color and then I'm going to do display flex and then column and then justify content to space between the text and the name. Okay, as you can see, but I'm going also to round these corners here. So let's do border like this. Okay, so save. All right, so now it's looking pretty close to the original one. Okay, so now we just need to change the text color for the H3. Okay, oops. So the text color for the H3 is card body and then H3, and then we change the color for that. The color and we're just going to put the text transform to capitalize. We want to capitalize the first character. Okay, as you can see, the first character is now in capital. And then I'm going to target the P tag, which is this one here. For more details, I'm going to change the color for that to this purple color. All right, so now as you can see, it's looking good. So now with all of our items, let me check. So the background color for the image, it doesn't look like it's showing here. So let's go back. Let me check what Pokemon image. Yep, so the background color, I'm going to set that to white. Okay, a white background color. Now, as you can see, it's looking like the original. Perfect. That's what we want. So when I click this individual item, I want to route to a specific item that I click on and also show the name. As you can see here, when I click, it's going to show you Pokemon and then the name of the character. So what I'm going to do, so for next, we're going to create a folder called Pokemon, and then we're going to be able to route to that folder. Pokemon. Okay, so now this route exists, Pokemon. We have the route. Okay, it exists, but we didn't add anything yet. It exists, but in that route, we're going to create a dynamic file. So we need to wrap that in the square brackets, and then we're just going to name this Pokemon and then .js. Okay, depending on the character, we're just going to route to that character. Okay, so here we're just going to create a functional component, React functional component. So let's just name this Pokemon. Export default Pokemon, save. Okay, so now when I route to Pokemon / whatever, it's going to show you this. I don't know. Wait a minute. Ah, this is the original one. here, when I route to Pokemon, it doesn't exist, but slash something is going to show you Pokemon here. Okay, so this route is dynamic. Whatever you put, it's going to be dynamic. So we're going to make it dynamic according to the name of the character. Okay, so we don't have the name of the character yet, so we need to get the individual Pokemon. Okay, so let's go back to our global. I'm going to collapse all Pokemon. So now we need to get the individual Pokemon. Okay, so this one is going to be simple. Get Pokemon const get Pokemon. So the name. So if we go back to the website here, if you type the name, you're going to get the properties of that character. Okay, so in that case, if you remember, the initial fetch of our data, we're getting the name and the character and the URL of the character. So we have the name already. So in this case, we're just going to pass in that name and then fetch the data of that character. So here, first, we're going to dispatch loading. I'm just going to do this quick with VS Code and then explain. So dispatch, we don't have the data we're loading. And then cost response, and then await fetch the base URL, Pokemon, and then name. Here, that's how we're fetching the name, the base URL, and then Pokemon, and then the name of the Pokemon. Okay, and then we're going to await that data into JSON, and then we're sending. The action we're dispatching for that is get Pokemon, the individual Pokemon, and then we're sending that data in a payload, and then now we need to update the state. So case get Pokemon, we're going to return the previous state Pokemon action.payload, whatever data is coming from the payload, and then we're changing the loading state to false. Okay, save. Let's send the function here so we can have access to that function where we want it to be. So now we need to have access to the function in the Pokemon. Here we say const. Okay, so here use global context. So make sure use global context is imported. Okay, so this should be use global context. Use global context. Okay, so now we have the get Pokemon. We also need to have access to the loading. Okay, and then I also want to have access to the Pokemon property, which is the object. Okay, I'm just going to rename this to Pokemon item. Okay, and then I'm going to save. So when I do COG, I'm going to say Pokemon item. We're not going to see anything because we haven't done the get request yet to this get Pokemon. Okay, so let's do that on initial render. Use effect. Okay, on initial render, we want to get the Pokemon, but it takes in a name here. Okay, so the name, whatever name we pass in after this, that's the name we're going to be using to fetch the data of that character. So to get this here, so to get the query, so we're going to do const, let's do it up top here, const, we're going to do Pokemon, and then we're going to use router, which is the next, coming from next router dot query. So this router is coming from next. Okay, so we need to do const router equal to use router. So we need to import that use router from next router. Okay, so router dot query. Okay, so save. So now I can actually COG this query. We've named the Pokemon. So if I go to the console, you should be able to see the query. This one, when I change it, okay, as you can see, it's changing. Perfect. So now what we need to do now is fetch based on the name. So here, if I do Pikachu, okay, just as a placeholder, let's COG the Pokemon item. Okay, save. Let's refresh this. It's an empty object, which is actually, let's go to the React Developer Tools, components, Pokemon. As you can see now, this object, it has all of those properties of Pikachu. As you can see, the name, it should be Pikachu somewhere. What's the name? There it is, the name. Okay. When I change it to a different character, it's going to also change this state value here. Okay. So that's what we want. So we want to fetch according to the name of the character. So what we're going to do, when I click, I want to route to Pokemon and then the character of the name of the character. So let's go back to the index. We're going to do on click here, on click. Okay. We're going to do a callback function, and then we're going to route to the Pokemon slash, and then the name of the Pokemon. Okay. So we're going to do router. So make sure you import router from next router, and then dot push. We're going to push to Pokemon, and then the name of that item, and then it's going to fetch according to the name we're pushing to. Okay, which is the query that we're getting initially. Okay, save. Let's go back to the home page. Let's see if it's routing to that page. Click. Router.push is another function. There's something wrong with the import. So make sure the way you import router, it's not like this. Okay, so it's like, okay, so perfect. So now save, click. As you can see now, it's routing to the name of the character, Pokemon's, and then the name. When I click a different character, as you can see, it's changing. So we want to fetch the data of this character. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the dynamic route. I'm going to, instead of putting a hard-coded name here, just put in the Pokemon, which is the query, which is going to be the name of that character, and then we want to fetch the data and put that data. So that data is going to be in our state. Okay, the state is called, the state value is Pokemon. We rename it to Pokemon item. Now let's see what we have in the Pokemon item. Hopefully we should have something. So inspect console. Let me refresh this. So the object is empty. Oh, because the console log is above the use effect, we can do it after we fetch the data. Okay, save. Oops. Where did I put the console? Console, I'll put it after the use effect, like this. As you can see now, we have something. Okay, perfect. It's working. Now I'm just going to say if. I'm going to do a check. Instead of just doing if, we have the Pokemon. If we have Pokemon, which is the query, that's when we do the get. Okay, that's it. We have the data, so now it's only a matter of displaying that data. So what are we going to start with? Well, let's start in here in the return. Let's give it a class name, or let's do loading actually. So if not loading, so when we're not loading, I'm just going to do Pokemon item, okay, Pokemon item, oops. We're going to do a div actually instead. Actually, you know what? We'll do the loading later. Let me just say Pokemon item. If we have Pokemon item, we are going to do a div, okay? For some reason, it's not auto-closing, which is so strange. All right, so if we have Pokemon item, in here, we're just going to do a div, and then we're going to have an image. Okay, so this image, so the source of this image is going to be very, very, very weird. Okay, so we're going to do a lot of checks. I'm going to say Pokemon item, okay, dot, because some of the images are going to be undefined, the sources, and yeah, there isn't going to be like URLs, so we need to find a way to check if we have undefined or no. So we're going to check, and then sprites. Okay, if you remember, we want to get a different image this time, so the URL is going to be different. Sprites. We're checking for now as well. Dot other. Same URLs, but I'm going to get the default image. Okay, so sprites. In this case, I'm going to get the default. Okay. Let me save. As you can see now, I have the default image. Okay, so some of them will not be existing, so we need to find a fallback, because in the sprites, we're going to have a default image, some shiny images, front. You can choose whatever image you want to use. So we need to have like a bit of a fallback. So we're going to sort the fallback later, actually. Okay. Yeah, actually, if you go to some of the property, there's a property which is very weird to get. I can't remember the name of the property. Is it in the other? Official artwork, I think. If you go, I can't remember which property which is going to give you a hard time to destruct if you want to use it. It should be saying, it should be in the artwork actually. Official artwork, this one. So this property is going to be very difficult to destructure because it has a dash like this. So what we're going to do, let's create a placeholder link variable. So I'm going to say let link, because we're going to update this. So let link, I'm actually going to call it my link. Okay, it's going to be an empty string on initial. And then here, I'm just going to check if Pokemon item, okay, dot sprites, dot other, okay. So I'm checking if they exist. I'm going to say const. So this is how you can get this property here, the official artwork. So the way to get it, so instead of if I do const, if I do official, so the correct name, so if you want to destructure the official artwork property, right? We don't have this property, but it's like this. Okay, you're going to get an error. Okay, so how do we destructure this property from the other? So to destructure this property, we need to put this property in quotes like this. Okay, so const, and then change the name to link. Okay, change that name to link. So now if I cog link, we should be able to destructure this property. So if I go back down here, as you can see now, we have that property. Okay, that's how we can destructure the property of that. So now we can go inside official artwork and then dot front or dot front shiny. So now I want to set my link to I'm going to set that to the link dot front default. Okay, I want to get the default. Okay, so now if I do cog, oops, my link, so it should output the link, the source of the image. Okay, that's it. So now we've destructured that. So for the image, I'm going to do a fallback. So if the image doesn't exist, I'm going to check here. Okay, I'm going to check. Else, I'm going to do my link. Okay, so here I'm just checking if this image exists. Display that image. If it doesn't exist, go to my link, the fallback, which is the coming from the artwork. Okay, which we have destructured here. Save. We have a fallback. If that image of the character doesn't exist, we have some kind of a fallback. So click. It's going to change accordingly to whatever character we click on. So we have that. We also need to style this. So we're going to style this later. So after the image, let's do the body, another div. Oops, div. And then here we're going to have an h2, the name of the character. Why is there an error? Wait a minute. Div. Okay, so let's wrap this in a fragment. Cut. Okay, save. Instead of wrapping it in a div, we'll wrap it inside a fragment. Okay, so now we have the body. In the body, we're going to have the name, Pokemon item, and then the name of that Pokemon. There's some issue. Pokemon should be Pokemon item. Pokemon item, and then the name. For some reason, I don't know why it's not showing. Click. Okay, yeah, there it is. So Pokemon item and the name. For some reason, on refresh, it's not showing. We're going to fix that later. So Pokemon item, and then the name of the Pokemon. Okay. So I'm also going to display some stats. I'm going to wrap that in a div. Okay. Div. Okay. So we're going to have an h5 and the name. So Pokemon. So we have name, and then Pokemon item. Pokemon item, and then name. Save. So first off, we have the name, and then it's going to show the property, the name. After that, I'm going to have a few properties. Okay, so after that, I think I'll just duplicate this. Let's do another div. So here we have let's do type, h5. So this one should be type. So we're going to map through. So the type property is going to give us, I'm not COGing the content, the properties. Let me go to the components. Pokemon. So the type it's an array. So we need to map through this array. Okay, so let's map through the array. It's going to be a p tag. And then we're going to map through the array. So here we're just checking for if it's null or undefined. And then we're going to display that. We're going to return the name of the type. Okay, as you can see now, there's the type. Okay, so let's do two more properties and then 2 or 3 or a few, if you will. Okay, let's for now actually let's start with this first. Let's create a module in here. Let's do pokemon.module, pokemon.module.css. Okay, so with some modules, let's do first off, let's start with the image. Okay, dot Pokemon image. So for the image, let's give it, actually, let's start with the background itself. And then we'll do the image, but let's start with the image for now. So image, let's do display flex and height. Display flex, justify corner center and the height of 380 pixels. Save, we need to use this Pokemon image. So let's go back. Pokemon, we need to import the module, import styles from Pokemon.css, the module. So to use this module, we're just gonna go give this a class name, and then we do styles, and then styles dot. So the name is Pokemon image. That's the name of the style. Save. Okay, so it's changed. It's now centered. Perfect. So styles. I'm gonna copy this class name. I'm gonna paste it here. After that, after the image, we're going to have Pokemon body. After that, I'm gonna also paste it here. We are going to have the info item. Okay. Copy this info item. We are going to duplicate this info item a lot of times. Okay, perfect. So now let's go back to the module and then continue styling this. So dot Pokemon image, and then we're gonna target the image. I'm gonna get rid of all these properties. I'm gonna give a width of 96%, and then I'm gonna say object fit to contain, and then I'm going to give it a shadow. So as you can see here, we want a nice shadow. So when I go back to the original, there's a shadow on each image. So we're going to be using a filter property, and then do a drop shadow. So filter and then drop shadow. So 2 pixels on the X, 4 pixels on the Y, 6 pixels for the blur, and then the color is going to be black, and then the opacity is going to be 0.5. Okay, as you can see now, we should have a nice shadow. Okay, that is working nice. I'm going to target the Pokemon body, and then I'm going to give it a padding of 2.5 rem top and bottom, and then 3 rem left and right. We don't see the changes yet because we don't have the background. Okay, I'm going to target the H2. So Pokemon body H2. I'm going to give it a font size and capitalize the first character, and also give it a color of white. We're not going to see anything yet because we don't have a background color. As you can see here is the name of the character, and then I'm going to target the Pokemon info. I'm going to do a display flex and then do a column, and then give it a gap of 1 rem for each individual Pokemon info item actually. So Pokemon info is going to be the parent. So we have Pokemon body, and then we need the parent, which is going to be the info item. So Pokemon body info. Wait a minute. So this is the info item. So everything in here actually needs to be in an info item. Info. So these items here need to be in a div. Okay, so class name, this one is going to be info item styles dot info. It should be info, Pokemon info, just Pokemon info, Pokemon info. Okay, save. Okay, so now display flex, a gap of 1 rem. Now it's working. And then now we need to target the actual info item. And then give it a gap of 0.5 and a display flex and align items to center. I'm going to paste it. So Pokemon item, display flex, align item to center, and then flex wrap. So if it cover the whole line, it goes to the next line. Okay. We need to separate this with a comma, by the way. So grass, poison. So we need to separate with the comma. So let's go back to the here. It's actually separated with a comma. Pokemon type. Okay, so yeah, the type should be separated by a comma. So we need to return a p tag. Okay. So this shouldn't be inside a p. We need to return a p tag. Okay. So p like that. Save. Okay, perfect. As you can see now, we have the type property that is working. Okay, so we have an h5 Pokemon item in h5. We need to style that as well. Give it a color of white and then a box shadow. Okay, and then the p tag, give it a color of #33, this dark gray color. All right, so nice. What we need to do is now style this whole item. Okay, I'm pretty sure we have a lot of stuff now that is already styled. So now we just need to do the background. This background here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a class so we can style the background. So the class, let's put the class here. So I'm going to do class name. Class name, I'm going to do styles. I'm going to do Pokemon BG. Okay. I'm going to save. I'm going to copy the Pokemon BG. Here, I'm going to say position to absolute. I want to center this. Okay, position absolute, and then top 50%, left 50%, transform, translate X and Y. So it's going to be centered. As you can see now, it's centered. We need to give it width and height with 600 pixels. Okay, I'm also going to give it a transition and the border radius and the box shadow, which we have done before, like that. As you can see now, it's nice. The card is looking nice. So the other thing is, now we need to do a dynamic background. As you can see, every time I click, the background is going to be different. Okay, so what we need to do is create an array of backgrounds, which is going to have some colors. So you can put as many colors as you want. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to say const. Oops, I'm going to just say Pokemon BG colors. I'm going to say const. It's going to be an array. Const. I'm going to say Pokemon colors. You can name this whatever you want. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste in an array of colors. You can find these colors on the internet, okay? So these are the colors I'm going for. You can use any colors that you want. Okay, so this is an array of colors. So I'm going to generate a random color based on this array. Okay, so I'm going to say const random color. Okay, random color. So here we're gonna do pick colors. We're gonna pick the colors at random. So we're gonna do math.flow. We're gonna chop off the decimal points if we have any decimal points, and then multiply by the length of that. So random is going to generate a number between 0 to 1. Let's say it's 0.5 multiplied by the length of this. Let's say if it's 10, 0.5 times 10, it's going to be 5, something like that. So yeah, it's going to generate a random value every time, and then multiply by the length of this array. Okay, and then it's going to pick that. Let's say if it's 5, it's going to pick colors 5, which is the index of 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 is going to be 6 actually. 6 because arrays are 0 based. Okay, so now this is going to return a random color. So let me CLG this, CLG random color. Go back to the console. So as you can see now we have a random color here. Okay, so that random color, we want to put that as a background of the BG here. Okay, so background, we're going to set that to random color, but only if we're not loading. Okay, only if we're not loading. And then we're going to say only if we're not loading, and we're going to put the random color. Okay, so now, it's, as you can see now, we have a nice random color. And then when I click again a different character, as you can see the color, there's a transition. It's not like quickly showing, there's a transition of the color. Okay, which is nice. Perfect. So now what we need to do is add on more properties, and then we're done. So the properties, the container of each property, it has a class of Pokemon info item. I'm gonna separate each of these property in a separate line, so it's more readable. So I'm going to create another info item. So this property, I think, let's do, what can we do here? Okay, so we have the type. Let's do the height. Okay, so here, let's do the height. Save. We should have the height. Pokemon. Yeah, this spelling was incorrect. The height. Now you should see the height. And then for the abilities, it's going to be an array. Like here, what we did here, we need to loop through the abilities array as well to map through it, not loop. And then I'm just going to paste that. Loop through the abilities. And then display each ability in a p tag, separate with a comma. Okay. So finally, I'm going to paste in 2 more properties, stats and a few moves. Actually, I'll just paste in the stats for now. Okay, stats, and then Pokemon, save. So here, I'm going to do another property. So here it's going to be a few moves, because the moves array is going to return a lot of moves. So sometimes they're like a lot. You don't want a lot of properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say Pokemon item dot moves, but it's going to be a lot of moves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice. I'm going to get only the, how many items do I need to get? Let me check. How many did I get here? Yeah, so we can get like 3 items. Okay, so what we're going to be doing, we're going to be using the slice method. So the slice is going to modify the original array. So the slice is going to take the start and end. Okay. So the original array will actually, the slice doesn't modify. The splice is the one that modifies the original array. So yeah, slice, the original array will not be modified, but splice is the one that modifies the original array. So I always get confused which one modifies the original array. But yeah, slice, it takes a start and an end representing the index of the items in an array. Okay, so the end is not included. So in this case, if we do moves and then dot slice, slice, okay, I'm missing a dot, and then slice, and then the start 0, and then if we do 3, the end is not included, so we're going to only get from the first index, second, 0, 1, 2, which is 3 items. Okay, so the fourth item on the third index is not included because arrays are zero based. So the fourth item will not be included. So only the first 3 items will be included. So if we want 4 items, we can do like this, 4. Okay, but the index starts from 0 to 3. Okay, and then the fourth item, the fourth index item will not be included. And then that's when we need to map. Okay, and then we return the p tag in here and then show the move. Okay, perfect. So now let's save. So if we also here, we can check splice. So yeah, splice, it changes the contents of an array by removing and replacing items. Okay, so splice, slice. So yeah, this is what splice does. You can, you can also delete items of an array. You can delete items at a certain place in an array. All right, so now let's go back. Let's see the property. Okay, as you can see now, a few moves. It shows like 4 moves, first 4 moves. Okay, that is nice. You can also capitalize the first character of this name, but I'm not gonna do that. It's entirely up to you. All right, so seems like we have a pretty solid working system here. Okay, but what I'm going to do now, I want to do a loader if there's no data. Okay, so what I'm going to do for the loader, I'm going to collapse. I'm going to, instead of doing this, collapse the fragment. What else do I need to collapse here? I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna say not loading. Okay, not loading. And that's when I want to show this. Okay, else, else loading. Okay, like that. So let's refresh. So as you can see, the loading just appeared for a bit and then disappeared. Okay. Okay, as you can see, the loading appears and disappears. We're going to put a preloader later on. But yeah, for some reason, the data is disappearing. So we need a way to, when we refresh, the data doesn't disappear. Okay. So let's get out of this for now, and then we can come back later to it. Okay. So go back. Let's go to the, let's try the index. Okay. So for the index, I'm just wondering what we can work on next. Okay, so global. Okay, I'm thinking we could work on this search header here. Okay, so let's work on the search header. I'm going to start with, go to the index, and then let's do a form. I'm gonna name this search form. Okay, and I'm going to create a class in here called input control. It's going to be a div input control. We're going to have an input, the placeholder, and then search Pokemon. Okay, so the type is going to be text. We need a state for us to search. Okay, so let's go and create a state. Const search. Okay, so it's going to be an empty string at the beginning, and then we need to handle the change. Const handle change, and then we need to update the state to whatever we put in the input. Okay. We also need to kind of do search some. I mean, we need to submit the data. Okay, so let's do submit later. Actually, now let's focus on just doing the input. Okay. So for value, I'm going to put search, and then on change, then we're going to handle change. All right. I'm going to save. I'm going to change the placeholder data here. I'm also going to put a button with a class of submit button, and then a text of search like this, and then save. All right. So if I go back to the home page, useState, because we haven't imported useState, we need to import useState from React. All right. So now let's refresh. Now, as you can see, there's an input here, an input. I'm going to copy the name of the class so we can style this in the global. You can create a separate module for the styles for the form. That's entirely up to you. But in this case, I'm just going to go in the global and style this. So since the form is at the beginning, I'm going to put this at the top. Search form, I'm going to set the percent relative, give it a padding and a box shadow. Okay, save, and then a display flex, and then everything in a column. As you can see now, the input is centered, and then there's a background color of white, and then a box shadow here. Okay, and then I'm going to target the input control. I'm going to set the percent of that input control to relative, because I want to percent absolute the button within the input control. Okay, I'm going to also target the actual input. After the input control, I'm going to target the input. I'm going to give it an outline of none, font family to inherit, and also give it a transition and a font size to inherit. In the body, font size is set to 1.2 RAM, so the input is going to have a font family of that, and then save. There it is. We need to percent absolute this button within the input control. Okay. I'm just going to say on focus, when I focus on this input, I'm going to give it a color of this purple and a border of 2 pixels. So when I focus, it has a border. And then the button, I'm also going to change the color of the placeholder for the input. So the placeholder is going to have a color of this gray and then opacity of 0.3. As you can see now, it's different. Okay, so now I'm going to target the button, which I'm going to give a position of absolute, and then top 50%, and then I'm going to center this on the Y minus 50%, which is at the center here. And then right, I'm going to give it a right of 1 rem. Okay, as you can see, it's now centered on the Y axis. Okay, within the input control. I'm going to give it a padding top and bottom 0.5 rem, and then left and right as left and right 1 rem. Save, and then give it a background color as well, and then a font weight of 500, and then a color of white, also a transition. Save. Okay, as you can see now, it's looking nice. All right, so now with the search, we need a way to search this data and also show some kind of search result here. So here, if I try to search something, Pikachu. Oh, wrong page. Pikachu is gonna show this results, search results here. Okay, and then when I click, it's gonna go to the character. So what we're going to do, I'm going to do a search results, which I don't have yet. So if we go back to the index, here, after the form, we can do a search results to show the results of the search. Okay, so I'm gonna say search if there's something in the search, which is the state. If there's something, if there's text in there, we want to show the search results. Okay, and then I'm gonna do search results. We don't have the search results yet, but let's just do a div instead. Div. Okay. Here I'm gonna give it a class name. Class name of search results. Search results. Okay, so copy this class name and then go to the global. We're gonna do search results. So here we're gonna do a position of absolute. Okay, and then give it a fixed height and width. And then let's do left 50 pixels, 50%, and then center this on the x-axis using minus 50%. And then do the z index of 5, so it's always going to be on top, and then give it a border radius and a box shadow. Save. So initially, there's going to be nothing. Because there's something, it's going to be active. When I remove, there's nothing now. Okay. Nice. All right. So yeah, that is showing pretty nice. What we need to do now is do the actual search of the data. So let's get all of the data. So to do this effect here, we're searching through the database. We're going to be using some utility functions from Lodash to do a debounce method. So it's going to allow us to, I don't know if it's a method or a function. It's going to allow us to do a delay to fetch the data of whatever, to display the data of whatever characters we're searching for. It's going to, as you can see, when I type, there's going to be a delay to display the data. So that's what we want. If we're requesting data from an API, it's going to cause a lot of stress on the server. So in this case, we're going to do a bit of a delay when we're typing the characters. Let's go back in here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get all of the data in the database. So I'm going to get all Pokemon data. I'm going to say const get Pokemon. I'm going to just name this database actually. Database equal to async. So if you go back to the website, they will show you the endpoint to get all of the data, which is this one here. Okay, you can get all of the data in their database. You can just copy this whole URL, and then here, dispatch. We're gonna dispatch loading, and then we're gonna do const res. Instead of doing this, I'm gonna paste in whatever we copied from their website. Okay, and then dispatch Pokemon database, and then all of the data is going to be in this database here. So what I'm going to do now, let's do const get all Pokemon data. Pokemon database, actually, that's what I've named it. So in this case, we're going to do the database. get Pokemon database. Why did I name the action? Get Pokemon database. Okay. So, and then all of the data is going to be in the database. So I'm going to save. Let's see if we have all of the data in the database. So let's go to components, global provider, producer, Pokemon database. Oh, because we're not using the function. So on initial render, we also want to get the data. So use effect, get Pokemon database. Okay. So yeah, we should have all of the data in here. It's going to be a lot of data. So that's why it's taking a while to display here. So there's a lot of data here. It's just a name and a URL. Okay, so on initial render, we're going to have that data. And we're not going to be searching on initial render, so it's fine. So now we have that data. So we're going to search based on this data here. So for us, we're going to be using a utility function coming from Lodash. So we need to install Lodash for us to be able to use that utility. So we are going to say npm install, and then we're going to install Lodash. Okay, so we need to also create another function that is going to allow us to search. Okay, I'm just going to name this real-time search. Okay, I'm going to say real-time search const real-time search. Okay, so we're going to get a debounce function, utility function coming from Lodash. Okay, so the debounce is going to allow us to set a timer, how much delay we want to do when we're searching. Okay, so in this case, we're going to do 500 milliseconds for the delay. So debounce here, we're going to take async because our function is going to be async, and then the query search. We can name this query. That's entirely up to you. Search. Okay. And then I'm gonna put the bounds of 5 milliseconds. So you can put if you put 1000, that's 1 second. So now in this case, I'm going to dispatch loading. Okay, I'm gonna say search Pokemon database. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say const results. So for the results, I'm going to filter. Okay, in the Pokemon database, I'm going to filter and then show whatever items includes whatever we type in the input. Okay, so we're filtering this, the database, res equal to state, okay, dot Pokemon database. Okay, and then we're going to filter, and then it's going to take in a callback function. I'm just going to name this Pokemon, and then here we're just going to return Pokemon dot name. Okay, whatever the name of the Pokemon in the database, Pokemon dot name, if it includes whatever characters we've input in the search here, we want to put that in the res variable. Okay, so this should be filter. Okay, so anything that matches any name that have those characters we're searching, put that in the res. Okay, so what we're going to do, let's try to CLG whatever data that is filtered. So in this case, real-time search, let's do real-time search. And then I'm just gonna put picker like this to show whatever results we have. I'm gonna do comma res search. I don't know. Okay, let's save. Let's see what we have on initial render. Let's go to the console. Let me actually, because I haven't searched anything. Never mind. Refresh. I'm not running the project, so npm run dev. I'm also going to refresh again. So hopefully on initial render, we should be able to see some data there. Okay, it's empty initially. It's empty because Pokemon real-time search, Pokemon database. Okay, so the reason it's empty on initial render because it's empty at the beginning, but it's going to update later on to have data. Okay, but so this console is not going to update. So let's see. Let's go to let's change the state first. So let's change the search results. Okay, so let's dispatch an action. Dispatch get search. So now we have the data. We're going to send the results, the response to the payload. And then here, let's change the state. It's not all Pokemon data, it's search. Okay. So here we're changing the search results to the payload. Save. As you can see now, search results is empty. We need to fix to see why. Search results, it's empty still. Okay, so let me double check if I'm doing anything wrong. Okay, so search results, get search. Also double check if you're importing debounds correctly from Lodash. Okay, it's importing. Okay, so let's go down. Okay, oops, search. Okay, so let's also put this to lowercase. Do it to lowercase as well. Okay, so save. Global provider. Okay, so search results still empty. Pokemon database. Let me check if I'm updating the correct property. Pokemon database. Yep. So Pokemon database. It has a lot of items. Oops. Don't know what the error was for. Save. Restart. No, refresh. No, restart. Search results still empty. Weird. Anyways. Real-time search. Async. Okay. Let me CLG. Okay, so we have the name, dispatch, the CLG, the response. Okay, so now we have 17 items now. So we have these items here. So that's the search. That is those characters. Pikachu. Payload get search. So the issue is, why is there nothing in the state components? Search results. Okay, now there's something in the search results. Weird. Search results. It's very strange why there's nothing sometimes. Okay, console log results. I think I know why. So get rid of this. So get rid of the real-time search. Send it through here. Real-time search. Okay, so now go back to the index. That's where we need to do our search. Okay, so get the function. The name is real-time search. I'm gonna get all Pokemon data. I'm also gonna get search results. Oh, we already have all Pokemon data. Search results. I'm also going to get the get Pokemon function and also the loading, as well as the real-time search. Real-time search. Okay, save. What am I missing? I think that's what I need for now. Okay, I'm gonna save that. So now I'm going to create a function called display results. Okay. I'm gonna do that after. Let me do the handle search actually. Const handle search. Okay, and then here I'm gonna prevent default, and then real-time search. I'm gonna put in the state value here. Search. Okay. So on handle search, every time I want to call this function here, the real-time search. I'm going to call that every time I change. Okay, every time I do handle search. So on submit, we're gonna do handle search. Okay, like that. Amazing. Okay. So we want to display those results in here. So how do we display the results in here? I'm going to create a function, const display search results. That's the name of the function. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to map through all of those items. Okay, so here we're going to say return search results dot map. Okay, we have a Pokemon, and then we're going to also return a div. Return a div. Return a div. Give it a key to the ID of the Pokemon and then the name. So now let's save. So now we want to display the results of this Pokemon. Let's go down here. Let's display the results. Save. Okay, so now, as you can see, the results are showing Pikachu for some reason. I think we still have. Wait a minute. Real-time search. Why is it showing? Okay, so now refresh. Okay, so now the search results are showing. Okay, so Pikachu. but it's not updating quickly. Okay. So yeah, well, we need to update the search results. Okay, so we need to, hold on, real-time search. When can we update these results? We might need to do another use effect so we can, update the results. So what we need to do, go to the Pokemon. Here, let's do every time the Pokemon change. So as you can see now, the image doesn't go away now. Okay, so we fixed the image. So now what we need to do is fix the search, which is not working as we expect. All right, so I think let me do based on the items search results. So here I'm going to do a conditional to check the items in the search, how many items we have. Search here, I'm going to say search results dot length. So search results dot length if it's greater than 0. Okay, so if it's greater than 0, that's when we want to do this div. Okay, so now I'm gonna refresh this. Pikachu. Okay, so it's on submit. That's when we're running this function, but we want to run this function either on submit or every time we change the text. Okay, we want to run this function again. So every time we change the text, run the function. Also, when we click submit, we want to run that function. Okay, so I'm just going to run that function here. Oops, not if it. I'm gonna say real-time search. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of the e.target value. I'm just gonna do search like that, and then save. All right, so now I'm gonna say Pikachu. Okay, so now there's a delay, as you can see, because we're using Lodash to show the data. So if I were to change this to, instead from 500 milliseconds to whatever value, let's say 3 seconds, which is 3000. That's like 3 seconds. So I'm going to say Pikachu. It's going to take 3 seconds to change the data. As you can see now, that data appear. If I search another character, it's going to take like 3 seconds, and then the data will appear. So in this case, we want it to be 500 milliseconds for it to call the function. Okay. So now we want to click on this character and then route to that individual character we click on. So we need to do route at a push to that route of the character. Let's go back to the index. We are going to be pushing on click. Let's do on click. I'm going to take in a callback function. I'm going to do route at a push to this route here, Pokemon, and then the name of the Pokemon. Okay. So hopefully when I click Pikachu, whatever character anyway, I'm going to click on that, and then it's going to route to that character. Okay. 0 or whatever character. When I click, it's going to show the loading. But instead of that loading, we need to install a package that's going to allow us to do some skeletons, some loading skeletons. So the package that we're going to be using is called React Loading Skeleton. Let's go to the terminal. I'm gonna stop the project. I'm gonna run npm I, the name of the package, React Loading Skeleton. Okay, and then I'm going to go to components. I don't have the components folder, but let's create one. Components, and then I'm going to do a loading component, loading.js, reach functional component, save. Okay, so now we have a loading. So we need to use the skeleton. So for us to use the skeleton, it's quite easy to use. So we're gonna do import. We're gonna import React loading skeleton, like this, and then skeleton.css. Okay, or you can do your own CSS, and then we're going to import the skeleton from loading skeleton like this, and then here we're just gonna return the skeleton, and let's give it a height of 800 pixels, and then width of 600 to match the card item of the Pokemon. Okay, and then I'm going to do a count of how many divs or the skeletons you want to show. I'm going to do one. I'm going to show one giant skeleton item with a height of 800 and a width of 600, and then I'm going to do a border radius. I'm going to set that to 12 just to be consistent. Let's save. So I'm going to go back to the dynamic route in here, and then we just do the loading component. I'm going to put in a container, loading. So the container, you can name this container whatever you want to name it. I'm just going to name it loading or loader. All right, and then here I'm just going to do loading. The component, just render the component in here, save. So hopefully you should be able to see the loading component. Let me search for anything. You won't be able to see it. It's like what? Let me see. Let me set the loading to true. Let me go back to global. Actually, what I'll do to simulate the loading, I'll create a local state in here. So here we're checking if loading. We have the loading property. There it is. I'm gonna get rid of this for now. We're just gonna simulate const the loading in the local state. It's going to be true. It's going to be always true. So as you can see now, we have the skeleton. Okay, because the loading is set to true, it's going to stay on the screen. So that means if the data is loading, you're going to see the skeleton, and then after we finish loading, the data is just going to appear. So the loading will be false, and then the data will appear. Okay, so that's the effect we're looking for. Now what we need to do now is style this data here. Okay, so to style that, let's go back to the index. We need to give it a bit of class names. So I'm just trying to think, what class can I give it? So the class is the key is the ID. Also, now, oops, one sec. Okay, so yeah, it's routing to the correct character, I think. Let me search. Yeah, it's routing to the correct character. Okay, and then we're pushing to this URL here. Okay, so now I'm going to There's a div in here with the name. Let's give it a class. So class. Okay, so Pokemon name, like this. Okay, so let's go to the styles. Let's do it in the global. Okay, so let's do. I'm just trying to see where we can do it. So after the search results, down here. So Pokemon name. Pokemon name. I'm going to give it this color here, the purple color. Actually, when I have a Pokemon name, I'm just gonna do display flex and give it a transition. Actually, Pokemon name, display flex, give it a transition and give it a padding and a bit of margin. Actually, padding. So there's a padding. Okay. So now we want to hover. When we hover, we want to change the background color. Okay. So we want to change the background color. So Pokemon name on hover. Background color, as you can see, changes. And also, let's change the color of the text. Okay, so let's change the color of the text to that purple color we've been using. Okay, so yeah, now it's changing. We can scroll. You can get rid of this scroll effect, the scroll bar here. You can get rid of that. Actually, let me check if I've capitalized the name. Actually, yeah, it's capitalized. So what we can do now, give it a font size, capitalize this, font size, font weight, color. Okay, so now it's looking, oops, it's wrong. Yeah, this one. It's looking decent. Okay, so to get rid of the scroll bar, we need to do dot search results. Okay, and then we're gonna do WebKit scroll bar, and then just give it a width. Just give it a width of 0 or whatever width, and then save. The scroll bar won't be there. You are still going to be able to scroll, but the scroll bar will not be there. Unless if you want to show the scroll bar, you can. Okay. Pikachu, whatever. You're going to, see the character. And then the information about the character, the powers, or you can increase the height of this thing to show more items. Okay, that's entirely up to you. I think what I'm going to do now, when I go to the dynamic route, I'm going to cut this to, instead of 4, I'm going to reduce to 3. Okay, perfect. So now it's looking decent. So what you can do, as you can see now, it's loading. It's taking a while for this character to show, and then you need to display the data. We have the search. Now we need to work on the functionality to load more content down here. Okay, so how do we load more content? We need to do a button. So when we click, we load more content. Okay, so let's go back to the index. So we have the loader. Actually, so after, I'm gonna collapse this. After this, I'm gonna have should be .next. Okay, and then we're gonna say if we're not loading. Okay, so if I'm not loading, I'm going to do a button. Okay, I'm gonna show a button. Or if not loading, or actually, oops. Well, I'm just wondering, how do I do the pipe? Or the length of the, what is it? The length of the I'm doing this on the wrong file. It should be in the index. I was getting confused, like, oh, what's happening? So here, so next, if not loading, or the length of the Pokemon, I think or Pokemon, or Pokemon data dot length is greater than 0. Okay, is greater than 0. If the length is greater than 0, okay, so if not loading, or the length of this is greater than 0, here we're just going to do a div. Okay, which is load more. So the length is greater than 0. We should have load more somewhere there. I don't know why it's not showing. H1 load more. Where is it? Inspect. Next. So, all Pokemon data, if not loading, it's not loading. All Pokemon data dot length is greater than 0. What? Why is it not showing? What's going on here? If not loading, let me get rid of the loading. Okay, so let's save. Okay, so there it is. So load more. So now let's type the next. We can do a spinner actually. Yeah. So now let's go to the global. Let's do the next. Let's go all the way down here. Let's do next. I'm gonna do position of relative, display flex, and center everything, and give a padding bottom of 2 rem. Okay, so there it is. So suppose we're going to do a spinner. Okay, and then I'm going to do target the button, which we don't have. So let's go and create the button. So instead, we're going to create a button. Okay, so button, and then it's going to be the next button. And then we're going to do load more. And then we're going to do a down arrow, an HTML entity, down arrow. Okay. And get rid of the on click. We're going to do that later. Save. So now we have the load more button. We just need to style that. So next, I'm gonna close this document, close this as well. What? What's the error? Oh, I didn't save something. So this should be global. Okay. So next, dot next, and then button. So we're going to target the button. So for the button, I'm going to give it a padding box shadow and the transition. Okay, so there's our button. It has a padding background. Okay, nice. So now what we need to do is on hover, give it a different color. Like this, next button, and then hover, give it a black color. Okay, so now we want to click and load more data. Okay, and add 20 more items. So what we need to do is create a function that allows us to go to the next page. So let me go back to the global. Okay, so here I'm gonna say next page const next equal to async. So for the next, we're going to be getting the next URL. So if you remember correctly, if I go back to inspect, when I go to the components, global provider, if I go to here, Pokemon is returning the name and the URL. What I'm going to do, I'm going to try to CLG. CLG in here in the Pokemon. I'm gonna CLG the data here. CLG data. So the data is going to have the next. Okay, so the next is going to allow us to go to the next page. Okay, the next property. So what we need to do in the next function is to go to fetch the next URL. Okay, so what's my next function? So here we're going to dispatch loading as usual. So I want to go to the next URL. Okay, so I'm going to fetch const. I'm going to do response equal to response state. We're going to fetch the next property. Okay, so the next, we don't have anything yet. So we're going to fetch the next property. We're going to update this later. You're going to see how we're going to do that. State.next. Okay. And after that, we're going to do data. And then we are going to the data is in JSON now. We're going to dispatch the next property. Do I have next? Yeah, I'm going to dispatch next. We're going to dispatch next. So in this case, I'm going to just send the data. The action is called next. Okay, next. Perfect. So the state dot next, it's an empty string initially. So next is set to as an empty string on initial render. Okay. So get or Pokemon. Where is it? Where's get or Pokemon? Get or Pokemon. Or Pokemon. So here, the next, we want to get the next URL and dispatch that. Okay. We want to dispatch the next property. Okay, so payload. So here, Pokemon, we're sending data to results. Instead of sending data to results, we're just gonna send the data because we want to have access to the next property. We're just gonna send this whole object here with the count, next, previous, and instead of data to results. Okay. Save, and then let's go back up here. So instead of action of getting our Pokemon, instead of action, so we need to get the results now. Okay, so we need to do payload the results action. The payload dot results. Okay, and also the next payload the results, get all Pokemon payload the results, and the next property. Well, I'm going to set that to action dot payload dot next the URL. Okay, the payload dot next instead of results. Okay, so now the next property, it should have a URL on initial render. Let's go back to components. So next, as you can see now, it is a URL to go to the next page. So now to go to the next page, we just do this URL. Okay, so let's do the case for the next action as well. Return, and then the previous state, and then so all Pokemon. Instead, we want to get the previous Pokemon data. So when I click next, I'll show you what's going on right now. So next, all Pokemon. So it's going to change to the next page data here. Okay, and then we're gonna set the loading to false. So we're gonna set the next property to the next URL. So now let's go back. Let's see what's going on. So next, in the next function, okay, we're dispatching the next action. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take this next, copy, and make sure it goes here. Next, we'll go back to the index, and then we're going to do next like this. And then when we click this loading button, on click, we're going to do next. Okay, save. So it should fetch the data on the next page. Click next. Nothing happens. Let's see why. Console. Next. COG. Click next again. Next. Nothing happens. Let's see if the data is changing in the components. So it seems like we have an error. Global provider. Okay, so Pokemon. Let's see if the data is changing here. Let's go down and click next. Next. Nothing happens. Oh, it's actually changing. It's taking a while to go to the next page. So the data was loading, but it's not updating the state data here. Okay, but yeah, it is indeed going to the next page. All right, but the data is just not updating. So what we need to do is show what that data, that is the updates of the data. Okay, and also keep the previous data. When I keep going to the next page, it's going to the next page, but it's not keeping the previous data. Okay, so I want to keep the previous data here, the previous state data. That's what I want to do. Keeping the previous data. So to keep the previous data, let's go back to the reducer. We need to go back to the reducer and keep the previous data. Okay, so where did I do the previous data? Okay, so in the next here, the results, we need to keep the previous state.all Pokemon and then add the results on top. Okay, save. Okay, so it should be able to show or Pokemon. It should be able to keep these results and add on new data on top. Click next. Okay, as you can see, it's adding new data now. Perfect. Now, what we need to do is update we need to update this information here. Okay, so in the next go back to the next. So I'm gonna do const new Pokemon data. I'm gonna loop again in the data results. Okay, so I'm gonna do for const Pokemon of data results, and then Pokemon results. We're gonna fetch the Pokemon URL of those items we're getting in the Pokemon data, because if you remember, it returns the name and the URL. Okay, so if we go to the next page, we've done this before, this loop here. If we go to the next page, we want to fetch the new items that came, the data of the new items that came. Okay, and then we are going to update. We're going to update the all Pokemon data. Okay, so we're going to update that to set all Pokemon data to previous Pokemon data, and then the new Pokemon data. Okay, save. Okay, so now when I click, it's gonna update now. As you can see, we can load more data. Okay, so here we're just like looping through the the name and the URL, and then fetching the URL. Okay, and then pushing that to this array, pushing the data to the new array, and getting the previous data and adding the new data. Okay, that's what we're basically doing. So this all Pokemon data here is also being updated in here in the all Pokemon. Okay, as we're looping through this. Okay, that's what we're doing. So now it works as expected. We can load more data. Sometimes it's a bit more, it takes a while to display this data when you click, but you can put a loader if there's no data. That's entirely up to you. As you can see here, I have I think I have some kind of a loading spinner. I think it's not showing, but yeah, you can put a spinner there. I think that's all of the functionality that we need for now. If you have anything to add, you can add, and then you can put some comments if you want to request anything new that you want to see on the channel. And also, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also share this video to other people. Yeah, I think that's it. If you want to add a preloader, I think I'm just going to add this off camera because I'm tired of making this video. I've been making this video without a break. So yeah, I think I'll see you on the next video.